This is a Brave Angels event where everyday Americans get time at the podium. My name is Jerry Silberman. I'm here in southeastern Pennsylvania. And the purpose of this forum is to hear from everyday Americans on the issues of the day. We hear from people of all races, classes, places, and politics, but the focus here is on working class participation. And We the People's Forum tonight is brought to you by the We the People's Project leadership team at Brave Angels, which includes several people on this screen. David Lapp is our fearless leader, Rita Chisholm, Janelle Burke, Apple are all part of that, and Wilkinson are also part of that group. So the forum tonight is on our public schools. It's a two-part question to understand how people understand the mission of the schools and whether or not they think that they are meeting them or not, and if not, what else could they do to change that? And our goals are to better understand how people understand these questions across the spectrum of politics, and also figure out if we have any common ground, if we identify problems, if we have any common ground for the solutions. And to learn something that might be helpful to others in our community and our country. The first part of the forum is we have four people who are lead speakers, who are a politically diverse group of parents and educators, and in some cases both, who will give their views on the two questions, what they think the mission of the schools should be and whether or not it's meeting it, and always grounding their comments in their own experiences. They'll have a brief opportunity to respond to each other, then move on to the second question, which is if you think that the schools are not fulfilling their mission, what could we do to help get them there? And after that, we will open it up to all of you to add your questions and experiences. And we really mean that, to ask a question of the lead speakers or to share your own experience. We want as many people as possible to speak, so obviously we're going to have to limit the time on those things. And our ground rules for conversations are the same that we use in a lot of Brave Angels events. We're here to understand each other and explain our views. We're not necessarily trying to change anybody's mind. We are speaking for ourselves and not representing an organization, and stick to the spirit of the activities, which is we're sharing our personal experiences, asking questions for clarification, and resisting the urge to get up on a soapbox. And I think most of you have probably been to other Brave Angels events. You know how that works. We don't interrupt people. We're respectful in listening to everyone, respectful in body language as well as verbiage. So our speakers for this evening are Stephanie McClendon, a mother of two daughters and has had multiple roles in the education community in the United States and abroad, including a school counselor and administrator. Elizabeth Christensen is a mother and volunteer who works on school governing legislation. She also holds a degree in secondary education. Annette Alvarez is an English teacher out of Livermore, California, who has a lot to say about the mission of education. And Elizabeth Motzinger is a former school board member who has three grown children, two of whom graduated from public high schools and one from a private school. So without further ado, I'm going to move on to our speakers, and we're going to ask them to speak alphabetically by their last name. So we're going to start with Annette. And the first question is, what do you believe should be the mission of our public schools?
Hi, so happy to be here tonight. Is it okay if I introduce myself a little bit, just so everybody
Absolutely.
knows a little bit about what got me to this point? I'm a high school English teacher. I teach in San Ramon, California. It's a suburb in the Bay Area. And this is my 13th year as an educator. For 3 of those years, I taught at a project-based learning charter high school. So I've worked at a charter as well as a public school. And I'm also the parent of a student. My daughter is now a sophomore at UC Davis. She did her schooling in public schools and then also at a charter school for 3 years. I'm not a career educator. I haven't been a teacher straight out of college. Before becoming a teacher, I worked as a business analyst. I was writing business requirements and conducting QA and up in the middle of the night testing servers and stuff for an automotive finance company. I've also been a magazine editor. I've been a content producer back in the .com days. So I have a lot of experience in like the corporate world that I think helps me as an educator. Both my parents were public school educators. My dad was in special ed and my mom taught high school math. And so like when I was little, like we would play school. My brother and I would take our stuffed animals on field trips. But even though I always knew that I wanted to be an educator, graduating from college, when my mom suggested it, I was like, oh, I don't want to be just a teacher. Like even back then, I had a strong sense that this wasn't a highly regarded profession. And I also think that I realized what an awesome responsibility it is to be a teacher. Like you can do a lot of good, but you can do a lot of harm if you don't do it thoughtfully, intellectually, and emotionally. So I'm glad that I finally accepted the challenge. I enrolled in a career switcher program at Regent University in Virginia, and I was teaching like the next school year. A little bit about me personally, I was born and raised in Miami, Florida, and I attended parochial school for 13 years. My parents fled Cuba as children in the 60s. So I was raised in a very conservative Catholic household. And my family's history is refugees, and my active membership as a Unitarian Universalist strongly influenced my political perspectives and my activism today. So thank you for giving me the time to introduce myself. So when I teach junior American Lit, we start with this essay that's written by Noah Webster in 1778, and he lays out basically like what he thinks education should look like in our new country. And so he says, in our American republics where government is in the hands of the people, knowledge should be universally diffused by means of public schools. And a lot of founding fathers have the same idea. If we are going to elect, we're getting rid of the monarchy and we're going to elect, the people who are going to represent us and create our laws. We need to know, we need to be able to think critically. And so Jefferson, Adams, Madison, they all agreed that in order for us to govern ourselves effectively, we needed to be informed about the history of our country. They were big on that. And then also to be able to think critically about our current affairs. So I know that there are other skills like, working with others and being a contributing member of society. I think those are important outcomes, but I think that the root of our mission as educators is to develop critical thinkers who are able to acknowledge how their biases may interfere with reaching logical conclusions. I think that our students should be able to detect misinformation and disinformation, which was a thing even back then. And they should be able to reconcile new data with existing beliefs. Our students should be able to be presented with new information and somehow reconcile that with what their opinions were before they had that information. And so I just told my freshmen this week during our lesson on critical content consumption that our success as a democracy depends on their ability to detect BS. And so, if I have an agenda that I'm pushing as an educator, that's the agenda, to save democracy by turning out as many critical thinkers as I can. So
thank you.
Thank you.
And next is, all right, I got to go back to my list. Sorry, I forgot. Next up is Elizabeth C.
Hello, Elizabeth. I'm Elizabeth Christensen. I'm in Portland, Oregon. When I was growing up, my lifelong dream was to be a mother, but I was always told that was not enough. And that was offensive to me. So I became a mother and I put my children through school. My belief is that the mission of our public schools is to help families teach their children how to learn. I believe that schools are to help families. The family is the foundational unit of society, and all other constructs are built on that foundation. Governments rely on the family unit to begin and maintain an organized society, and the levels of government are necessary to build on top of the family and maintain order all the way up through the United Nations, which charter does recognize the family's right to raise their children as they see fit. Public schools as a government body are one of those levels of government that builds on the family foundation. They cannot replace the family without undercutting their own foundation and being less able to do their job. So instead, schools need to help families on behalf of children who are grounded in the family base and passing through a public school level of government. And then schools need to teach children how to learn. How to learn is not what to learn. Certainly there's some basics, some reading, writing, mathematics, but in modern times, we're teaching those basics in families, and kindergartners are entering the school system already knowing a lot of those skills. So teaching children how to build on and use those skills sets them up for lifelong learning, which is the goal, I think, of public education. No one believes that you're going to get all the knowledge that you need for life while you attend public school. So learning how to learn as you continue through your life is the skill that we need to come out through from all levels. And that includes problem solving, research skills, scientific method of discovery, creativity of invention, and communication. And if we build on those skills, teach children how to learn, they will become lifelong learners, and their education will continue long past public schools.
Thank you. Next up is Stephanie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie. I am currently a high school counselor. I've served in many different roles, including teaching abroad and intervention school counseling. I'm very, very passionate about what I do. It is challenging every single day, and I prepare myself for absolutely anything at the high school level. I work very, very closely with administration, deans, school psychologists, and many other professionals at a high school level that we call ourselves the student support team. And what I believe our mission, maybe not specifically at the lower elementary and middle school levels, but at the high school level, the challenge has become to meet the needs of all students while partnering with parents and communities. What that looks like can vary, obviously, from many different factors. But in order to meet the needs of our students, that goes into a few different categories. So we have our academic needs, we have our social emotional needs, which are changing very, very much on a daily basis. And then we have post-high school needs, getting kids ready to enter the workforce, whatever that may look like, college, going straight into a job or trades, things like that. And so a high school counselor used to be called a guidance counselor. The terminology has changed, and what I do and what my role is has changed significantly, and we're very, very busy people. And so the mission, like I said, is to meet the needs of our students, and that is a lot. And like I said, it's changing. We have a growing number of concerns from parents, from school board members, from the legal system, from FAPE and what that looks like, from students and recognizing their differences and the different generational trends that we're facing today. And so I believe that that is our mission. And I just want to let everyone know that I'm an optimist. I believe that we can work together to achieve amazing things with our kids. And the message that I hope everyone leaves here today, and the purpose of myself being here, is that we can be those role models, and we have to work together to do it.
Thank you, Stephanie. And our last opening speaker is Elizabeth Motzinger.
So my background is that I served on the school board for 16 years because I cared a lot about our community coming together. When I got elected, we had basically a very conservative board for the last 20 years in our county. And I felt like there needed to be other voices on the board as well. I think the role of public education is to prepare our children for their future and not our past. And I think that's one of the real struggles people have, is often they're remembering their own childhood and trying to, let me stop that. We're often remembering our own childhood and trying to recreate that for our children, and yet they're living in a different time, and what they need to flourish in their future is somewhat different. Everybody does need to learn to read and to write and to do enough mathematics to get through life reasonably well. More importantly, they need to be able to get information and use information and discern what is truthful information from what is not truthful information, because access to facts are actually very easily available, but you need to know where to look, and you need to know how do you discern what are good facts from opinion pieces. So I think that's really important. I also think school is the one place where people come together in a society where you're going to be in a room, you're going to spend time with people from all different walks of life, from all different perspectives. And ideally, school is the place where we really help our kids come to e pluribus unum, right? We want them to love the diversity of our country. So I think it's possible. I think it's absolutely possible for schools to do a good job. I think most of them do a good job. I think a great deal of the challenges have to do with the diverse populations we have and how hard it is often to meet the needs of those diverse populations. I think schools should raise good citizens. I think schools, you should come out of school ready to engage with public life in some form or fashion. And voting is one part of that, but community engagement and involvement is equally important. And one thing I think is really, really important for our kids right now is that they are hearing a lot of almost apocalyptic talk from both the right and the left that leaves them wondering if we believe in their future. And I think one of the most important things adults can do is say, no, we believe in your future. We believe in you. We believe in fighting for a future that's good for all of you. So,
thank you. Well, I want to thank all of our opening speakers for very interesting and diverse comments. And also I saw some things that went across the board there, but I really appreciated hearing a lot of things that were very new to me and very stimulating to me. So I want to give just a couple minutes. If any of the speakers, initial speakers, has a question to the other, something that is a discrete question that you have about that you don't understand quite what they said, we'll give a chance to answer that. Not necessary to, if there are no questions here, that's fine, we just move on. But then we will go to the second point, the second question in the same order, and that is to say, in your own experience, which means in the schools that you have direct experience with, do you think your schools are meeting that mission as you understand it? And if they are not, how do they need to be fixed? So any preliminary questions before we start round two? Okay, Annette, back to you. You've got some very articulate people and all of you to give us some more to chew on. Thank you.
All right. Well, Jerry, I understand that you want us to root this in our experience, like in the schools where we teach. But my point of view is, you know, looking at if our mission is to build a critically thinking electorate, I'm looking also at the electorate. I'm also looking at those of us, you know, as adults and how we're doing. And so I think it's obvious to me from the number of us who are like just willing to believe disinformation, their unwillingness to acknowledge facts. And this is in my personal experience, just so what I, you know, conversations that I've had, but also what I see, like, you know, the discourse in our country, just the national discourse. So I think that public education is not meeting the goals of building critical thinkers, people who are able to detect or willing to detect fact from fiction. So what do I think we could be doing? So when I went through my career switcher program, it was a what do you call that? Like it was a, you know, couple of months maybe. And I used my career switcher credits to get to where I needed to be. So it wasn't like a full 4-year program, but it didn't include any courses on critical thinking, how to teach these skills at all levels. And I think that that would be something important to consider, is including these in, you know, these types of classes in educator preparation programs. I'm super excited by the number of people that are here today, because this tells us just how many of us are looking to affect change in our public schools. I think to affect real change in the classroom, there's going to be a lot of great ideas, but for any proposed measure to be feasibly enacted, I feel like we need to limit class size to like a reasonable number. Crowd control makes teaching and learning very, very difficult. And it's tough to build strong relationships when there are like 180 of them out there. It's exhausting. Some in the room might feel like, well, what, you know, you don't really need to build relationships. Your job is to teach the curriculum and teach the content and teach the skills. And I think that we all need to acknowledge the research that shows that an optimal learning environment requires interpersonal connection. An optimal learning environment, there's a sense of safety. There's a sense of belonging. A child that doesn't have these things is not in a good place to learn. So this notion of teachers sticking to the curriculum without building relationships is simply not rooted in best practice. I understand that it might make some parents uncomfortable, but if you want your kid to learn, you're going to want them to have some sort of a connection to their teacher. I think that educators need to appreciate, and many of us do, I don't want to speak for all of us, but I think parents are experts in their kids, generally speaking, and this expertise is really invaluable to us. And so parent involvement, I think, is really important. Coming to back to school night, emailing us with important information about that might help us understand what's going on in the family that might impact their kids' learning. But also, you know, that goes both ways. I think acknowledging that we are experts, you know, teachers are experts in instruction. We are experts in classroom management. You know, that I think sometimes that's missing. And, you know, it saddens me when there is this confrontational relationship between educators and parents, because we both want the exact same thing. We both want that kid to walk out of there happy and educated. And so I think we all need to remember that, but I also think that teachers need to be recognized as experts in their field. And I think that's it.
Thank you. Elizabeth, and again, if one of the previous speakers has said something that you agree with, and you can acknowledge that and move on, it might help get us more time for other speakers.
I can acknowledge that parents are experts in their own children. And yes, we need to work together with teachers who are experts in your field as well. So thank you, I appreciate that. I know, I agree that public schools are not meeting the goals. They are not doing what they need to be doing right now. So my idea is to fix it. I think that we have to start back and retrain the teachers to some degree at the college level for new teachers and in-service meetings for existing teachers to encourage and reward age-appropriate creative approaches to teaching. Lecture has never been a good way to teach. And so field trips, work releases, competitions, performances, mentorships, clubs, there's a variety of ways to teach content that engages with the students, and we should be rewarding that sort of creativity. I also think that not all teachers welcome parent involvement, and sometimes I do believe that parents need to have an opt-in for some really highly controversial subject matters as they're being taught and curriculum, so that they can maintain that family connection for their children. I also think that for the students, we need to incorporate more real-life learning experiences at all levels. And there's such a variety of programs, I could never name them all, but off the top of my head, I could think of like President for a Day, the Junior Achievement Program, which teaches finance and coding. There are coding classes that start in kindergarten that teach organization and creative thinking. PE and athletics teach team building. Human dignity curriculum is a social relationships forum. There's all the different arts for performance, literature, and visual. There's science fairs, technology for STEM, service and compassion. I think we should have school choice. There's a variety of public school choices that are available if the government allows it and will put tax dollars towards it. But I think that opening up and rewarding creative approaches to teaching that involve the parents and the families would be the right way to go.
Thank you. Stephanie?
I think both Annette and Elizabeth unpacked quite a bit, and I'm not going to speak in absolutes. I do not think that it would be fair to say that all schools are successful in achieving the mission, and not all schools are failing at this. So there are a lot of factors that go into it, and there are many schools who are thriving and providing opportunities for students to thrive. It takes research on the end of the parents to support their child and finding out what those are and asking questions, and then letting their child from there take it over and ask for help and be an advocate for themselves as well. So I won't go into too much because I want to hear from what you guys have to say. I do think that engagement and belonging are two fundamental contributors in student success. Students have to show up to school to learn, and we need parents' help to get their kids to school. That has become a big challenge today, and among other things. And then finally, I think one of the most important things too that I'm seeing on a daily basis is that students do not know how to fail. They do not know how to be bad at something, and they do not know how to pick themselves up after they do something wrong or speak in front of a class. With many different challenges that they face today, we have got to teach them that it is okay to fail.
Okay, Elizabeth.
Well, first I have to say, I love that it is okay to fail, because we all will fail some of the time. We're all going to make mistakes and stumble. So I think that's important to be explicit. One of my favorite groups is something called Let Grow, which is really about, with young children, helping them have a little bit more autonomy and ability to play together without being so heavily supervised by the adults that they don't learn how to problem solve. And I think we're really harming our children that way. In the district where I served, there were 80 schools and like I said, 55,000 children. And I would say that for the majority of those students, they came out very well prepared for the next part of their life. And so I think schools often do a really good job for kids. One of the biggest challenges is that kids who are having a really hard time in every other way in their life, school reflects that. It doesn't cause it, it reflects all of the challenges that they already are living with. So, for example, I love when parents are really involved in their children and can give them all kinds of loving and enriching opportunities. And quite sadly, some of our kids come into kindergarten not having ever been exposed to talks about colors or numbers or letters or books. And so when you have a child who's coming from a very enriched, warm, loving, nurturing background in a classroom with kids who have had none of that, it is an extraordinary challenge that public schools try to meet. And we're reflecting the culture writ large. One of the difficulties is, I know, for example, in the state of North Carolina, we are consistently lowering the amount of funding that's going into schools. And what we pay teachers is essentially going down. Teaching is turning into a career people really, really feel they can't enter, and more than half of all teachers are gone within the first few years. People come in idealistic, they get beat up, they don't make enough money, and they just think, I can't do this. That breaks my heart, because who I want in classrooms are those very people. I want them to stay. And I'm really afraid we have a big cliff of retirements coming up right now. And that's really a problem. So I think not paying for schools, not funding them properly. I think we also have a problem with mission creep, right? All of the problems children are having are now being basically placed into schools, right? Whether they're having medical problems, whether they're hungry, whether they're homeless. There are so many issues our kids are walking through the door with. And so when I love, Elizabeth, that you love to be a mom and that's what you chose to do. I think that's a wonderful career choice. And I think it's probably been a real benefit to your children. And quite sadly, many of our children are just really going unparented, and trying to meet their needs is extremely difficult. And if you're trying to meet those needs while teaching math and reading, and it's really hard.
Okay, well, thank you all. I think those were some great comments. I just wanted to ask one thing. Elizabeth mentioned that she's from North Carolina, but not everyone who was in the room at the beginning introduction. So if you could just quickly, the other participants, go around, starting with Annette, and just say where you're from. Go.
I live in Livermore, California, Northern California.
Okay, Elizabeth C.
In Portland, Oregon.
Stephanie?
From California, living in Minnesota.
Okay, all right, so we have the South, Midwest, and 2 from the West Coast. So at this point, I'm going to ask them, each of our 4 speakers again, do you have any burning question that you would like to ask one of your other opening speakers, or can we move along to opening it up to questions and experiences from the other people on the call tonight? No? We're ready to go? Okay, so.
I have a question.
Okay, yes.
And I have a question for Elizabeth. And the question is, and this is really heartfelt, is what people tend to want their kids to learn to think really critically. However, when their kids start thinking critically about what they're learning at home And I don't mean, it's just one of the challenges I always had was serving with people who said, I want to teach my children the truth. And I was like, I'm not sure we agree what's true. And so I was wondering, how do you feel when your kids come home questioning some of the things that are a given in your family?
I feel like the question is always valid. And to open up the opportunity to explore together, parent and child, is just exactly what we do at Braver Angels, explore it together and see if we can both learn something new. And that's why I stress lifelong learning. I don't think that I, as a parent, have stopped learning, hopefully.
Thank you. Okay, so before we dive into this, there's a couple of things I want to remind people that this is, you have a limited time to talk. It is a question or an experience. You can direct your question to one of the lead speakers or to all of them. But if you have a question, just ask the question and let people answer. Don't make it a rhetorical question. And I also would like everyone to retitle themselves, rename themselves now because I want to be able to call on alternate political perspectives. So if you can go and rename yourself in your Zoom on the computer, you should be able to take your mouse to the top right-hand corner of the screen and click on those three dots and click on rename. And what you can do is just add blue, red, other, some one word that captures which side of the political spectrum you're on, so that we can make sure that we are getting questions from across the board.
Jerry, the three dots are where your picture is. So in your picture, there are three dots.
Yes, in your own picture.
If you were taking up the whole screen, they'd be the three dots.
No, I'm sorry. Thank you, David. In your own picture. Okay, so I need to be able to see the full screen now to call on people. Okay, I guess I could do that for myself. Okay. So if you, okay. I want to call on Janelle. Are you still with us, Janelle, or did you leave for the birthday party?
I am here.
Okay. So okay. You're up. Your question or experience.
So I'm going to speak from my experience when I had to write it down because I got triggered a little bit. So first of all, I agree with Miss Christensen and what she stated. It was like she was in my head, like she knew what I was thinking when she was talking. So as a mother of 7, I've had to be that mom that most teachers don't want to have to partner with when it comes to my children. And I've come to the realization that I'm the key expert on my children, because I've noticed a true, and it's sad, at school, my child is one child, at home, my child is a different child. And it feels like it's a splintering of children once they enter the public school system. So if you have a child that's fractured, that child cannot learn if that child is two different people. So what we have to really focus on, that I've been looking at and what I've been dealing with our local school district, is pushing them to educate parents when they educate their children. Because the things that they talk about in the school now are things that were not kitchen conversations. We didn't talk about those things at the table. So I don't teach my kids certain things, but when they come home from school, then it causes chaos in my home. because those are things that I didn't learn about, and some things I still today at 41 years old don't want to know about. So if you're going to teach a child, keep in mind that that child has to go home at some point. So while the teacher is the authority in the classroom, the parent is the authority in the home. This is a co-parenting relationship that's kind of forced on us by the government. So if the government wants to educate, the government needs to co-parent correctly, listen to the other parent, so that that one child can be that one child in both environments and can actually grow into a productive citizen and not be fractured. Because that's the only way we can help these children. Parents need to be educated with their children while they're being educated. School policies tell us what we need to do, but they don't put us into the picture. They don't think about parents when they write the policies. But one thing that they have to remember, Jerry, is that as a parent, your policy don't tell you how you have to deal with me and what the repercussions are in harming my child. So a lot of teachers need to really just think about what they may be doing to a parent-child relationship and what they may be doing that they don't recognize.
Thank you, Janelle. Let's see. Who do we have up next? How about Debbie Velasquez?
Hi there. I can agree with every single person that spoke today. And I feel your passion, and thank you for doing what you do. I did it myself for over 30 years and I'm currently retired, and it was the greatest joy of my life. And that brings me to the word joy. I've got grandchildren now, a number of them, and they are in school and they're not experiencing joy. They are experiencing incredible stress and pressure. When I was growing up, and I know we were talking about, we can't go back to our own experiences, but I also tried to do the same thing when I was teaching, is to set the kids up when they had homework that they could do it on their own, for instance, and they didn't need a parent sitting next to them. But I also feel like kids are really dragging their feet about going to school a lot of times because they're really stressed out in that environment. I have a granddaughter that left kindergarten, and she was supposed to be able to write a full paragraph with 2 or 3 transition words in an introductory sentence. And the joy of listening to a story and to be engaged in the whole magic of learning about all the things that can be taught in school, it seems to have become such a chore. And I think it's because of overregulation. Everybody has to be in lockstep, and you have to be right on the same page at the same time. And it's making me hurt for our children today, that the amount of pressure that's on them, and the fact that so many teachers are not being allowed to be creative, is taking a lot of the love of learning away. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's go to Ron McFarland.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ron McFarland, and I taught school in Denver Public Schools for 35 plus years. And what a great joy it was to be a teacher, especially I was in the inner city my whole career, hard to serve schools. And it challenges you. But I would start every school year off with, what is my purpose? And of course, kids would say some of the materialistic things, give us all A's, you know, that sort of stuff. And then I would say, no, my purpose is to love you. And then they would look at me weird. And then I said, what is your purpose? And they would say the same old thing, oh, we the teachers, because I was a business teacher, teachers what assets and debits and things of that nature were, you know. And I said, no, to love each other. And then I would read them about Frederick Douglass. I said, who was my hero. And I said, once you learn to read, you will be forever free. It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. And they would look at me and go, Mr. Mack, you're weird. And then I would say, okay, I'm going to visit your house sometime. And I would show up. And they didn't think I would do it, but I would show up. And I say, this is why I love you, because I'm here for you. Now, are schools meeting their needs? I would say yes. And I would say no. It just depends on which school you're at. And I was at a lot of schools where it was very difficult. But now that I've been retired since 2017, I'm getting the fruit of it. They come back and they said, thank you, Mr. McFarland. Now, the mission of the school is to teach high quality to our kids. It's not about Ron McFarland as the teacher. It's about them. And so I would go and collaborate with their parents, the administrators, and the community. And I think some of the solutions, especially in the area where I was at, is vocational education, as well as preaching about going to college. That is one thing that I would love to see schools put a lot of priority in there, instead of putting all these, what I call smothering things that smother the resource of being a great student, like CRT, whether who's going to use a bathroom or not. Important for those who it's important to, but it's not important to the whole collective group all at once, because it smothers and then people get emotional. You're not teaching values to my kid. And then they miss the whole thing of what education is all about. So if it was me, I would give them all a certain kind of money and they can pick whatever school they want to go to, because I believe in choice. And let the competition begin. Now, what is my purpose? To love you. And what is your purpose? To love me back. Let's be Americans and work together and try to find what we call the braver angels way.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
Okay, we're trying to get through a few more speakers here, and then we're going to turn it back to the opening speakers for comments and responses. If anybody specifically has a question to one of the opening speakers, I know there's a lot of people who have their hands. If you have a question, not an experience to share, we'd like to get some of those in here. So let's go to Bill Marut and.
Thank you. I have a question. I am retired and I do not have a child in the school system and have not had one in the school system for a long time. But I sit at my desk and I look out the window and I see the school bus come by and pick up the kids and drop off the kids. And it's dropping the kids off at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, there's a whole half a day left. I mean, how come these kids are coming home at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock? They should be in school till 5 o'clock. They've got a lot to learn. They've got to learn reading, writing, arithmetic.
No, Bill,
just wait a minute.
Focus your question, please.
Well, everybody else got a long time to talk. How come I don't get a few minutes to talk?
I asked for, if you have a question, it's fine to share experience.
All right, I'll get to my question.
Or to ask
the question is, why do kids get out of school at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the afternoon when they should be in school till 5? And why do they only go to school part of the year instead of all 50 weeks of the year? They have a lot to learn. The kids in Korea are doing it. The kids in China are doing it.
Okay.
Why are our kids not doing it?
Thank you for your question. Let's see if one of our opening speakers has an answer to that. or a response? Elizabeth?
I understand your thought, especially when compared on the international level, but my answer is because there are other things in life besides school. And school is one form of learning. And so they come out and they do other forms of learning, and particularly within their family. And that's why I think that the school day can be formulated that way.
Okay. Any other question? Anyone else wants to respond to that, Elizabeth? M, did you want to respond to that?
Yes, I agree with you, Elizabeth, that there are many other things children need, and developmentally more than about 6 hours for young children is a bit long. I would love there to be more activities that are really good for children and are children-centered in schools. And I really believe in enrichment. I believe in after-school athletics. I believe in kids having some free play time. And like Elizabeth said, time with their families and time to develop as whole human beings. The other thing I want to say about standardized tests is one of the things in the United States is that everybody gets educated and everybody comes into the results of standardized testing, which is not true when we're being compared internationally. So special needs children are in our numbers. If you are a kid who is doing pretty well, our top students compete with top students everywhere. And our more challenged students, we do a better job of trying to meet their needs than many other countries do.
Okay. Anybody else want to respond on that question? Okay, I'm going to go to Chris Walonsky. Give your hands up, Chris.
Annette was gonna, I think Annette was going to make a comment.
I'm sorry, did I?
That's all right. Just a real quick comment. As an educator during the pandemic, it became really clear to me that some people saw me as a babysitter, because when kids were back at home, there was a lot of problems with working families who had both parents that are working. So I don't know, Bill, that you would be able to convince families to have their kids, I don't know. I feel like with family vacations and I think a big part of the answer to your question is because families want it the way that it is right now. So that's all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to go to Chris now.
All right. I had a question about information and misinformation, and was curious about the process of biases and, talking about teaching kids to identify their biases. I'm just kind of curious, as educators or people who are involved in education, what are the processes that you go through to acknowledge and check your own biases?
That's a good question.
That's okay. I just did this week. So there's a bunch of resources online. Stanford History Education Group does a lot of really great lessons. So that's Stanford History Education Group. They did a study in 2015 on students' civic online reasoning, thinking, basically can you detect BS when it's presented to you on a tablet, on a phone, on a computer? And the results were not good. And they created all of these lessons around that. And so I know a lot of educators use that. We also use, when I say we, I mean me. So I introduce my students to the media bias chart, Adfontes, ADFONTES. She's got this media bias chart that just kind of shows top down and left to right. And she includes her methodology on how did we put, how do we put CNN here? And how do we put the Wall Street Journal there? And so I actually taught my students not only like what, you know, you can take a look at this and see where people might land. I explained to them, you don't necessarily rule anybody out because they're left-leaning or right-leaning. You just are aware of that bias. It just informs your bias in the same way that you would ask, you know, how you would did examples of biases that they might have in their own lives. And it's like, of course, you know, your mom is going to think that you're the greatest kid in the world. So those are two resources that I use. But then I also, you know, constantly remind them, like, at the end of the day, you're going to have to think. You're not just going to look at this chart and be like, okay, you're going to need to think, and you're going to need to compare, and you're going to need to see, you know, follow the money and see who's pushing an agenda. So that's how I do.
Stephanie wanted to respond to that question as well.
I'll be quick. In terms of school counselors and administrators, the school counselors follow ASCA, American School Counseling Association. And our role is to not tell students what to do or how to think or who to be. Our job is to help guide kids. I often describe myself to students and families when I'm present with them. I'm kind of like the cool aunts. You can come talk to me about what you want. It's confidential. I'm here to help. But my job is to not, you know, tell you what to do. And so I check my biases all the time to ensure that students are thinking critically about what's happening socially and emotionally. And I know that that's a big concern for a lot of parents and communities. So the ASCA has a lot of great information in terms of how we kind of guide our thinking when we're working with students.
I think it's really important also to remember that we all have bias, and that to be a human being is to be biased, and we're not going to lose it entirely ever. And so if people can see you saying out loud, I tend to see things this way, but I'm open to hearing another way, particularly if they can see you change your mind. That's one of the best things young people can experience, is for you not to be so identifiable. One of the interesting things I talked, I guess, to somebody earlier today, when I got off the school board, the local paper ran an article about me, and I was considered the first, well, I was the first Democrat in many ways for a lot of years, and my good friend was as conservative as they come, and they wrote an article about our friendship over the years, which was great, and we often agreed with each other, because what we were focused on is what's good for kids and not what's good for my bias or your bias. So I think it's important for our kids to see that. But we're never going to be entirely without bias. And I think if we know that, that's better than pretending we will be.
Thank you very much.
Okay. We're going to go to Barry Leibowitz and then Kathleen McGill.
Hi all, thank you. I'll just say very quickly, I was so impressed by the thoughtfulness of all the educators on the panel and their initial remarks here. So thank you all for being so thoughtful. Here's my big question, which we're not going to solve, but I think I'd like to hear where it takes you. Especially, I was hearing what Janelle was saying initially when she first commented in the Q&A. How do you propose that we attempt to reconcile the legitimate or real desire and need of parents to have input in their children's education with allowing or requiring or stipulating that some other authority should be dictating or determining or formulating curriculum? I'd like to hear where that takes you.
Great question. Who wants to take the first shot at it? Elizabeth M.
Yeah. One of the things that happened in our district is that the social studies group, we have what's called the integrated curriculum, which is a lot of focus of people wanting sort of certain groups to have African-American history or Hispanic history or Native American history. And I come down on, this is American history, and we have a shared history, and it should all be taught together. But one of the things that the social studies department did that's incredible is put together primary source curriculum, so that it was never coming to the conclusion, here's the letter that was sent from the governor to this group. This is the phone call that they made back. This is, so there's, for example, about Mississippi burning and people dying in Mississippi. So it was never what, you know, who's right and who's wrong. It's here's these sources. Start to have conversation with each other about what you're learning and what does that mean. And I think it's doable. It's hard, but it's wonderful because it also helps people discover that they're not as ideological as they thought. They start to see complexity. And I think that if we are willing to grapple with complexity together, I think we have a way better chance of being that better country we all want.
Okay, thank you.
Kathleen?
I want to, yeah, it's Kathleen is next. Do you have a question or experience, Kathleen?
Question.
Great. I want to, before you speak, I want to suggest, suggestion actually came from one of our speakers. We're going to take a few questions. We're getting towards the end of the time for questions from the group. So we're going to take a few questions at once and then go back to our speakers for collective response and then a sort of wrap up. Okay, so Kathleen?
So about half a dozen years ago, I went into the school and did head checks, and I found the classroom exceedingly chaotic. Kids were yelling, kids were shouting. This would be about a grade 6, 7. And I hear those stories still from friends who are still in the system that it's very, very chaotic. I'm curious how, like, I know you said you're experts on classroom management, but it's really, I just hear stories. The vice president at the high school, or the VP, spends all his day just going around dealing with discipline issues. I'm just curious if you see examples of that getting better, and if you've ever looked across the pond to Michaela's school with Catherine Birbal Singh, who has a very strict structure in her school and has been successful.
Okay, we'll take that question and we'll hold that. I see people taking notes, and let's take another question from Don Kraus. You have a question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I love the speakers. I was hoping to have somebody a little bit more on the choice side, but I heard the two bills make their comments, and I thought I would key on that. For as long as I've been alive, the model has been teacher, as babysitter, basically. I mean, my question is, why can't we understand that, the secret is every parent who's out there working needs daycare for their kid from before they start working till after they stop working, so they can go let off their kid and pick them up and have a hot meal for them in the middle. None of that has to do with teaching. There's all sorts of skills in doing that. And so my question to the teachers and to other people on the panel is, how do we get away from this model? And also, how do we break up these massive public school bureaucracies in big cities who are really failing the children, particularly of marginalized communities? So those were my two questions.
Okay. We'll take one more very quickly. Deb?
Hi. I just wanted to understand if there was anyone on this panel who was against school choice, and if so, why? I know I heard a couple people say they were for it. I am for it, but it seems like it always gets hung up somewhere when it comes to implementing it. So I'm trying to figure out who dislikes it and why.
Okay. Thank you. So we have a few questions there. Just to recap, has the school's discipline situation getting better or worse? How do we get away from the babysitting model, I think I heard, and how do we break up bureaucracy in big cities? And is anyone against choice? So, okay, the first hand I see up is Stephanie. I'm sure everyone will have something to say.
Yeah, I will be quick because I want to hear from everybody. Also, Barry, just to comment on your question, graduation requirements are very consistent across states. They do vary slightly, but I think that's a great place to start as well. And we are branching off. School districts have opportunities to adjust those to some extent. So I think part of the answer to your question lies in what we are requiring for students to graduate with a high school diploma. In terms of discipline, yeah, it's an issue. My husband works in an elementary school and he's works with an array of students, and it is mind-boggling the stories that he comes home with. Kids breaking each other's faces and, you know, threatening teachers. It is awful. It is absolutely awful. I see things in high school that I don't want to see often. It is very scary. And I think coming out of COVID, it has, you know, we have a lot of work to do in terms of teaching kids how to treat each other like human beings and being kind of more on a humanity level. And so we have a lot of work to do there. And again, I think an answer to that is you have to get them involved. They have to be engaged. They have to feel like they matter. If a student or a human being does not feel like they matter, you know, what's the point? You know, that's truly what every human being wants, is they want to matter, they want to belong, they want to engage. Marginalized communities, there are some amazing programs out there. Trades, like I said, the International Baccalaureate Diploma teaches kids to think very, very critically on an international level, and you can graduate with some amazing critical thinkers. There are so many different programs. If you are wondering about what those are or how to, you know, encourage your neighbors' kids or anybody, please reach out to people in your schools and ask what programs are available, because there are a lot and there are grants that we can write. There's so much opportunity. I'll let others speak now.
Okay. Who wants to go next? Just unmute yourself and talk.
So first, great comments, Steph, good questions. Our public schools daycare, I think that that's something that should be just put out as a real question that we ask ourselves as a society. Is that what we mean it to be? Or is that not what we mean it to be? And be very clear about that. It was very clear during COVID that for a lot of families, that's exactly how they had experienced school. And many parents were really upset, partly because often their children were very undisciplined, were very chaotic, participated very badly in school. And for a bunch of parents, it was the first time they actually saw what their kids were like. I did not find teachers surprised by what their kids were like. They're like, yeah, they're like that in school. Parents were surprised. I think that culturally, we're not doing a great job raising children. I think we're not meeting their real needs. I think we know developmentally what people need, but our curriculums are not built around developmentally appropriate things. And we would redo school almost entirely. We would have people learning multiple languages in kindergarten and first grade and not even worry about math till they were in second or third grade. There are things that we know about the way the brain develops, and curriculum is not built around that. I'll tell you what my problem with school choice is, and I live in a community Now, I am in a school choice district. Again, we have 80 schools. There's lots of options. We do have an IB school. We do have a vocational high school. We do have early college. So we have lots of good choices. My problem with the charter schools is, first, the kids who have the highest needs always get canceled out of the charter schools. And we have seen that repeatedly. So charter schools basically take the kids who are already fairly highly motivated with parents who are highly motivated and take the dollars basically. And in a school, in a state where we're not funding education adequately, to take the dollars out of public schools is making it harder and harder. But it's leaving behind the kids. We as a public school system cannot say your child's needs are too great, we can't meet them. We can't cancel your kids out of our schools. They're ours. Our charter schools do not keep kids with very high needs. And they often come back to us having really missed several important milestones in their education. And then it's our job to catch them back up. So that's my difficulty. If we wanted to fund public schools adequately so that they were not losing resources they desperately needed, then good, have charter schools. But until we do that part, then that's my concern. By the way, charter schools are not under the same testing guidelines. They're not held accountable in the way we hold public schools accountable. Neither are the private schools. They don't have to standardize tests. They don't get put under the same microscope that public schools get put under.
Okay, we have time for one more, then we're going to have to start wrapping up for the evening. Anyone who hasn't spoken yet want to respond to these questions? Annette?
Yeah, so I worked at a charter school for 3 years and didn't really have a strong opinion about it politically one way or the other. It was a project-based learning school, and I think in theory, it was an excellent option for students, and it worked actually very well for students for many years. But unfortunately, as Elizabeth was saying, there's not a lot of oversight, and it turns out that this charter school imploded. We found out that the CEO was either malfeasance or incompetence. You know, to this day, that's still being debated in our community, but it was extremely detrimental. And I think of charter schools almost as like franchises, where it's like, oh, I love Panera. No, you love Panera, the Panera that's close to your house. You know, you don't know what kind of experience you're going to get because they're not regulated. I also wanted to acknowledge the issues that we're seeing in discipline. Though, you know, and I attribute it to the lost years for COVID. Students really need to be taught how to be in a classroom again. But Elizabeth brought up a really excellent point at the very beginning. It might have even been when we were waiting to speak. And she was saying that children their eyes are on us. They are seeing how we behave and the way that we are behaving. And that's one of the reasons I joined Braver Angels, is because I love this idea where we can disagree with each other civilly. And it's something that I'm teaching in my classroom as well. We can disagree civilly, but they have not seen that. They have seen all sorts of really, really ugly behavior in our leaders. And of course, nobody's surprised. You know, the use of the N-word is there's an uptick in my school. Nobody's surprised. Nobody's surprised at just how callous students are being towards each other. And I think it's a combination of what they've seen on the political, sphere and within their own families. And then also those years where they weren't in a classroom. So just wanted to acknowledge that, yes, that I am seeing that happen.
Okay, thank you. So our clock is winding down. I hate to bring this to a close because it's been such a great conversation, but we do need to recognize people's time frames, and we have a couple of announcements that we need to make before we do a final wrap up. So I'd like to call on David Lapp to talk about something very important in Braver Angels that's coming up. David?
We have Braver Angels. Yeah, that's right. We have a Braver Angels convention coming up July 5th through the 8th in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. And it's going to be a big gathering, 500 plus delegates from all over the country, even number of Reds and Blues and many people who are independent. And so just want to invite you to consider applying to attend that. You can find out information at the website, braverangels.org/convention, and consider coming. And we get more blue-leaning applicants than red-leaning applicants, but because we need to have an exactly equal number, if you're blue-leaning and you recruit, you bring somebody else who's red-leaning with you, you're in. And so if you're blue-leaning, that can be a sure way to get into the convention. So just want to encourage you all to think about that. Second thing is I want to just invite Ron McFarland to just say a little bit about a Braver Angels membership and why Ron McFarland decided to become a member. Ron?
Yes, thank you, David. And thank you for this workshop today. Very informative, especially as a former educator. What brought me here to Braver Angels was a polarizing moment with my favorite nephew. And so I'll leave it at that. But after a long talk with him, he still wouldn't change his mind. So I was sitting in my den or downstairs in the atrium, and I found the newspaper that had Braver Angels. Are you having trouble with your family? And Ron picked that paper up, and then I went to braverangels.org, and it says just for $1 a month, you can become a member. And that was the best thing I ever did, because as you see on my my window, I have an R next to it. And so most people of color are with B's. And so occasionally I get voted off the island a lot of times, but they still love me. And the best thing about joining with Braver Angels is you can meet a diverse people with different perspectives. But as everyone here knows, we do not change your perspective. We want you to share those perspectives so you can bring back that American way of dialogue. And for those of you who are educators, we have workshops for you. We have pilot programs for middle schoolers, high schoolers, and college. And just go to the braverangels.org, look at all the events that we have, and challenge yourself and be an agitator like my hero, Frederick Douglass, but in a positive way, and join Braver Angels. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
All right, you heard it from Ron. And Ron, you're gonna be at the convention, right, this summer?
I'm gonna be there with bells.
All right, with bells.
Okay. So if you're not already a member, there's a link in the chat. And there's also a link in the chat for our evaluation, which we'd like you to do for this event. When you leave it, that was put up a little while ago in the chat, so you may have to scroll up. But we'd like everyone to do that. And now I'm going to.
Hey, Jerry. Hey, Jerry.
Yeah.
Forgive me for interrupting. This is unplanned, but it just occurred to me that we have Mary Thomas Valens leads something called, I think it's called Braver Schools, but I just wanted to, she's here, and I just wanted her to invite her to take a minute to just say a word about that, since we have so many educators and people involved in education here.
And there's
Mary,
also a link to that in the chat. Yes.
Yes. So yeah, Mary, you're up.
All right. Well, I'm a lifelong educator, a lifelong learner, and I found that even though we had a diverse panel, there were so many things I agreed with. Before I tell you about Braver Schools, I would just like to make a suggestion to all of us. when we talk about education, let's not talk about the state of education as if it was one entity. We all know great schools. We all know schools that are not doing so well. But when we take the whole country and say the state of education is bad, we are stereotyping, dismissing, and doing those things in Braver Angels that really don't help us see clearly. And to that end, we have a group of people that meet the third Wednesday of every month at 2 o'clock. So that's tomorrow Pacific time or 5 o'clock Eastern time. If you would like to join us, just let me know. My email address is marytv, because of my initials, at braverangels.org, and I will send you an invitation. So tomorrow is our next meeting. You don't have to be an educator, just someone who wants to work with school communities, either schools, parents, teachers, and bring Braver Angels skills to the greater school community.
Okay. Thank you, Mary. So I want to go back to our opening panelists, and I want each of you to just say briefly what you're taking away from this event.
May I interrupt for just one moment? I apologize. I just want to bring a point up that one of our attendees has pointed out, and this is something that each one of us will have to do individually. Someone has shared that the comments about charter schools, that there are some charter schools that are regulated. I don't know this personally for myself. I haven't looked into this, but please, and I believe that Lynn might have put that in our chat. If y'all would look at the chat, you can see what was said, and we don't want to leave, we want to be as open as possible. This is something I don't know about, but please look into that a little bit further as far as regulation of charter schools, because one of our attendees has pointed out that there are charter schools that are regulated. Thank you.
Okay. Annette, closing remarks?
Sure. Just it's just really encouraging to see so many people interested in improving our schools and improving the quality of life of our students. I was struck by the parent concerns and the parent perceptions. So I'm really glad that I was able to hear that.
Elizabeth C.
Thank you. I am encouraged. I thought I was an optimist, but listening to Stephanie, then I have learned a little bit more optimism, and I appreciate that perspective that opened my eyes a little bit better. I think that we have a lot of work to do, but I feel like we have a good group, bipartisan, who is going to be doing this work and moving forward together, and that's a good thing. I also learned a little bit about organizing Braver Angels events here and what makes things work and what we can also improve on as an organization. Thank you.
Steph.
I have learned, I had an assumption going into this because again, I'm going to presume positive intentions about all of you guys being here, that you guys are all agents of change. Wherever you go, whatever you are doing, the families, the parents, the grandchildren, that Debbie, you spoke very beginning. I mean, we have so much influence on everybody and we are agents of change. And so we have the ability to impact and move forward, onward and upward.
And last, but very definitely not least, Elizabeth.
I think this has really been lovely. I think that it's really important for us all to know that the only future we have is together and it's in our children. And so if we're not there for them, we have no future at all. So I hear a lot of love for children in this space and I appreciate that. And I think if that could get reflected into our communities, that would really help everyone.
Okay, well, thank you. And thank you, everybody, for participating. And I look forward to seeing you again. And I hope to see some of you in person at the convention.